Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is a place where writers like to gather together, talk about writing, all things writers, for writers, and by writers. So we're really glad to have you with us. We have a lot of our regulars in the chat. I see there a couple new ones, so welcome, welcome. And if you're watching our replay, we're really glad that you take the time for yourself as a writer to kind of grow in your craft, and hopefully your encouragement too. We have something special planned. We got all three of us here today. I'm Jean Wise. I'm one of your co-hosts. I have Johnnie Alexander, our fiction expert, and our nonfiction and marketing expert, Bethany, Jett. And all three of us are going to talk today about the book. I'm going to take my sticky notes off, called To Create by Jordan Raynor. Raynor, yeah. In that way. And this is kind of what the approach we're going to do. It has an intro in 4 parts. And so each of us took a section. I'm going to just give a little bit about the intro and lay the basis of this book. And then we'll pass it on to Johnnie to do part 1. I think I do part 2. Johnnie picked up part 3, and Bethany's going to help part 4, and we'll just kind of have a discussion, I think, of what's all going on here to share a little bit. So thank you again for joining us. So do either Bethany or Johnnie, do you want to say something as we begin about the book?
I would just like to point out Melissa's comment in the chat that the author of the book liked our thread on Twitter. So that was pretty cool.
Really? All right.
Yay.
Hey, we were going to talk about it. So in that way, anything, Bethany, overall, anything about the book yet?
I just thought it was so cool how it was so much about entrepreneurship, which is not something I had realized before picking it up. I was really thinking it was going to be more about like the artsy side of life, which I don't relate to very well, I feel like. So I thought it was super great.
Yeah. And that leads us right to the intro, because she starts right off the bat. He does, excuse me. I was going to say that. He does. Right off the bat on what an entrepreneur is. And I thought it was interesting. It tells a little bit of the history of the word, and I'm a word person, word nerd, and I love this anyway, but that the word entrepreneur first appeared in French dictionary in 1723. Here, I thought it was a 21st century.
Yeah, like a new word.
We're old, you guys, if you're talking about But it was described as a person who undertakes a task for a financial risk. And when he writes this book, he takes that, but he expands on that. And I really like, because he defines an entrepreneur as somebody who's creating something new, which could be an artist in any way. And this is his definition, which I think is really good. It is the basis for the whole book. Is the entrepreneur is anyone who takes a risk, doesn't have to be a financial risk, but takes a risk to create something new for the good of others.
Yes, I loved that.
I did too. Isn't that a mission statement we all can kind of adopt in our writing ministries and our speaking ministries? You know, we take a risk, and sometimes that's sharing our stories. It's a risk of putting so much blood, sweat, and tears into our writing, you know, and then get rejected. You know, it takes a risk to do that, you know, or put some of your own money into self-publishing even, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, and take a risk of starting a business like Serious Writer, right, Bethany?
Oh.
Yeah, but Serious Writers, for example, and I kept thinking about the Serious Writer business that you've developed, Bethany, as I read this book, because you created something new, but it wasn't just for you and Kyle and everybody, you know, it was for the sake of others, for the good of others. Which,
thank you.
Yeah, and I just think that is a good way for us to think about our whole writing and speaking ministry on that way. And I loved how he uses the word entrepreneur and creative, kind of all the way through. Bethany, you kind of said that all together. But there are 3 parts to the book, basically. Well, 4 parts after that, 4 parts. There is the calling, which talks about our calling to be entrepreneurs. There's the creating. There is the challenges that we have. And then what charge does that give us? What are we supposed to do with that? So it wasn't a hard to read book, I didn't find, but it was kind of affirming and inspiring on that way.
Oh,
So what do you guys have to add? Anything as we start?
yeah, I wanted to segue off what you said about it being an easy to read book. And I had a thought about craft, which is, for nonfiction. And I was thinking what a great book this is to use if you're writing nonfiction, because he very easily shares so many other stories and anecdotes and trickles his story in. It was not very much his story focused. And I think sometimes that makes the best nonfiction. You feel like you learn so much about companies and scenarios and things. I just thought, like, craft-wise, it was really good.
Yeah, and the examples that he gives are relatable.
Yes.
I'm going to share one when I talk about my section, and it was two companies we all knew, so almost we were already into that, so it was an easy buy-in as a reader.
Yeah. Oh, that. I'm writing that down. And I love that.
Yeah, but it was. So it's well crafted as a, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I read books now on two levels. I read them as a reader, but then I read them as a writer. Sometimes I have to read them twice.
Yeah.
But I love the Johnnie stories pull me in as a reader.
Oh, yay.
But a lot of the nonfiction, I read both ways. And sometimes it distracts a little bit from the real message. But anyway, I got to sometimes have, which hat do I have on? But anyway, part one, do you want to go in and tell us a little bit about part one,
Yeah,
John?
I will. And it really goes kind of off what you were just talking about, being an entrepreneur. And he immediately starts off that God is the first entrepreneur. I mean, the creator of everything, right? And because we're made in his image, we just have that creative bent as well, right?
Right.
Okay, I was a little distracted there for a moment. There is so much in all of this. I think one thing in the first section that really got to me, and if you have a copy of the book, I'm on page 40, and I am skipping a lot. There is just so much good stuff in here, but just to give some highlights. Victor Hugo, he has a quote from Victor Hugo, who is not necessarily one of my favorite authors, but he has written one of my top favorite books, Les Miserables. I absolutely adore that book, adore that story. I've read it 3 or 4 times, and it just really speaks to me in lots of different ways. Tried to read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, could not get into it. I think I read 10, 20 pages. That was it. I've never read that book, so I can't, but I love Les Miserables.
Renee says you should read The Toilers of the Sea.
Oh, I don't even know that one. I'll have to put it on my list, because maybe I should give Hunchback another chance. I don't know. But anyway, this is a quote in the endnotes. He's actually quoting this from another book, so I don't know where Victor Hugo said this. And I hate to read to you, but I am going to read to you, so just bear with me. Talking about the idea of eternal work. So Hugo says, I feel within me the future life. I shall most certainly rise towards the heavens. The nearer my approach to the end, the plainer is the sound of immortal symphonies of worlds which invite me. For half a century, I have been writing my thoughts in prose and in verse. History, philosophy, drama, romance, tradition, satire, ode, and song. All of these have I tried. But I feel that I haven't given utterance to the 1,000th part of what lies within me. When I go to the grave, I can say, as others have said, I have finished my day's work. But I cannot say I have finished my life. My day's work will begin again the next morning. The tomb is not a blind alley. It is a thoroughfare. It closes on the twilight, but opens on the dawn. Isn't that just beautiful? And so we can just, I know, and we can just pour our hearts and our talents and our creativity into our work. And I love that he said he tried all these different avenues of writing, not just one. He did all these different things, and he's finishing his day's work, but but when he dies, he's going to wake up and there's going to be more to do. And actually in part 3, I'm going to talk about this again. So I'm not going to dwell on it very much here. But to me, it was just like, this was just such an encouraging thing to see not to just look at one book, one poem, one story, but we have this lifetime of being creative in all kinds of different ways. And it's not going to end. It does not end. It goes into eternity.
I think we should copy that, put that on our desks. Page 40 for you guys.
Page 40. I just absolutely love it. Love it. He talks about life being work being meaningful. And he talks about not to think that people are called only to be ministers and missionaries and what we think of sometimes as Christian work, but that, or, I don't know what I want to say, like religious work. But, you might be called to be an entrepreneur. You might be called to be an accountant. You might be called to be, just what? To
dishwasher.
Yeah.
A dishwasher. Brother Lawrence, I love his little book. He's written, 1300s, 1400s. And he praised God by washing the dishes, working in the monastery.
Yeah.
That was where his calling was and his service was, so that is. Every work can be ministry.
Every work can. Yeah. And we've got to do the work that God has called us to do. Discerning our calling. Okay, I'm going to do that really quick too. There are 3 questions that we can ask ourselves to discern our calling. But let me start off on page 51 with this quote by Dorothy Sayers. Work is not primarily a thing one does to live, but the thing one lives to do. It is, or it should be, the full expression of the worker's faculties, the thing in which he finds spiritual, mental, and bodily satisfaction, and the medium in which he offers himself to God. So work is a good thing, and it's also how we offer ourselves to God through our work. So how do we find out our calling? 3 questions. What am I passionate about? What gifts has God given me? And where do I have the greatest opportunity to love others? And why don't you guys, I'm not really following the chat right now because I'm talking, but go ahead and can you answer these questions? What are you passionate about? What gifts has God given you? Where do I have the greatest opportunity to love others? And I can say, because you're here, I know one thing that you're passionate about is writing. I know that one gift God has given you is to write, or else you wouldn't be here. And then the question becomes, where do I have the greatest opportunity to love others? And that's the one I kind of struggle with, because I love writing fiction, and I think a lot can be learned from fiction. But, it's like, it's not as spot on to help others as nonfiction is. Does that make sense?
It brings joy.
Is that enough?
Imagination.
Is that enough?
Hope. It does.
So.
I think when you read fiction that way, it uplifts your spirit. It feeds your soul in a different level than.
I hope so. But it's like that.
It's too much left brain. It's the right brain. The holistic side of it,
The whole thing. Because if you're going to, if you're wanting help raising your children or with a spiritual issue, there are tons of great nonfiction books out there, and you get those. But we can learn from fiction too, and it can just be an escape. But you've got to do what God calls you to do. And I know, for years I thought, I want to be a writer, and I'll probably write nonfiction. I want to write fiction, but I'll probably write nonfiction, because that would be more helpful. That would be more direct. But you know what? That's not what God's called me to do at all.
If you notice, if you pay attention, there will be something that will just resonate or stir in your heart, or that's life-giving. That's a passion. And I sometimes I get discouraged, and I'll get off focused on what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm probably jumping to challenges, Bethany, in that section. But sometimes when I remember what makes my heart race,
Yeah.
those are the passions that the Lord has given me, and that is what he has called me to do.
I call them heart tugs. And it's like, it's even like with ideas for stories. It's like sometimes there will just be that tug on my heart, and I'll just know, and can I take like 1 minute to tell something that happened this morning that I've never had happen before? So lots of times in that, that waking period, like my dogs had got me up like at 6:20 to go out, and we went out. So you go back to bed because I'm not ready to get up yet. Didn't want to be up yet at all. And but you're not really falling back to sleep. Well, that's a really good, it's a praying time for me, and it's an imagining time for me. And I'm trying to think of a short story to write, an idea for sure. And I've got the idea, but I don't have a character. And so this voice came in my head and started talking. And I was evaluating the voice. And then I said in my head, I'm sorry, you're not the right one. Go away. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm auditioning people. And I said to this character, you can come back another time. You're not right for this story. You can come back another time. But go away. And it's like, wait a minute. I am actually auditioning characters in my head.
Yes. It reminds me of that scene in the Charles Dickens movie we all talked about a couple years ago.
Yes, Man Who Invented Christmas.
And all these characters are alive in his office, and they're trying to dictate to him what they want. And he's just, wait a minute.
It was so
I'm the writer here.
I mean, I'm sure I've done that before, but not to this extent. I mean, it was just like going a new level, and it's like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. So the character I need has not shown up yet, so please pray that she does. Okay, I'm going to do one more and then turn it over, because there's just so much. Oh, and where was it? I had it right.
Find it.
Oh, here it is, the top of page 56. In order to best glorify our Creator and love others, Christians should do the work we are best at, work that God has equipped us to do exceptionally well. And that's what I'm going to leave you with on part 1, which is calling.
Which is the calling. And that grounds us again, gives us affirms our call, and sets us off in the direction that we are to do. Part 2 is called Creating, and there's 3 chapters. It's why we create, and what we create, and how we create are the 3 chapters. So I'm going to do kind of like what Johnnie did and just highlight a few things from each chapter on that. And why we create, and his comment is specifically that to God our motives really matter a great deal. Are we creating for ourselves, for just financial reasons, for a name? Or are we creating for the glory of God? And that's sort of his emphasis on these 3 things here. And his example, which broke my heart a little bit, is one of my favorite places in the whole world. And don't get me started right now, because we're waiting on pins and needles if our trip is canceled in August, is going to Walt Disney World and going on a Disney cruise, and they're going to get canceled. But anyway, he is everything on Disney focuses to what? Disney.
Yeah.
Even though all the magic and all the wonderful good that they do, the focus is always to protect that name and focus on Disney. And he kind of sets, when we look at why we create, is to create a name for ourselves, which robs God of his glory, or is it something, are we creating for the glory of God? He writes, following the call to create means that we no longer work to make a name for ourselves. We work for the glory of the one who has called us. And his positive example is one I have heard of before, and it's Johann Sebastian Bach, who it's a great, he shares his story about writing and all that. He says, as he entered the workforce, he knew, and I'm reading on page 78, he knew precisely what, this is Bach, knew what God was calling him to do, was to marry his love of music and his theology, to achieve a goal of well-regulated church music. Isn't that a focused mission to marry his two passions, music and God? And he did. And if you aren't familiar with, he ended every single one of his compositions solo Deo Gloria, which means glory to God, alone. Every single one, he signed them with that. And what a neat witness thing. I've often thought, I am not, this is one thing I'm really bad at. People say, well, you autographed the book, and it's like, so I signed my name, and I want that one thing.
That one phrase to always.
That one phrase. So
Yeah.
that kind of really got to me when I read this book. I thought, well, maybe it's time to work on that, But anyway, just to sign everything. And I have a friend who's a writer and also a theologian, and he shared his journals. And every day he journals, he signs it. God is always more with a capital. And I've used that an awful lot, so I might adopt that one. But God is always more. And it moves you forward, and it shares the message in such a neat way. So I think that's kind of cool. Why do we? And then chapter 5 is on what we create. And again, he uses he points us to that we create products that reveal God's character. And it doesn't always be questions about us. Doesn't necessarily review, though we might share stories of us. But it reveals about God. And I think he's done so well in this book. Bethany made the comment, he has part of his story in this book, but it's so much more than that. And I think that's part of the success of the book. And his good example of that is C.S. Lewis, which a lot of us have read and loved. That C.S. Lewis used words to paint pictures of who God is and who he is not. And boy, I tell you, that really does come true in Lion and Witch of the Wardrobe, for example. What we learn and see about God and all that. The number of products we can create to reveal God's character is limitless, and as our ability to learn more about who he is. So I think if we focus on God and who he is, we'll always have something to create. The what will be there on that. And I think any of us that work in any kind of form of ministry, we always kind of know our primary message. Mine is always that everybody is a beloved child of God. Mm-hmm. And God will never desert you or forsake you. That I say that over and over, and that appears in what I write and I speak continually. So there are messages we've been given. But I want to spend a little bit of time on chapter 6, and it's how we create. And this was one of these examples that I thought it was very, very interesting. It starts on page 99. It's very interesting. He uses the example, and I'm going to go ahead and say that it's in the book. So I'm going to go ahead and say the company he talks about is Forever 21, the place whom has insanely low prices and always puts on their bottom of their bag John 3:16, which initially sounds good. They have a statement of faith that they follow. But, and this gets back to how we create, when they go behind the scenes of the products that Forever 21 purchases and buys, a lot of them are from not so good employers situations, and they're not following through. And there has been a lot of labor law violations for this company. And so how they created didn't really fully represent God well on that. And that's tough. It's tough to think. Now, his good example, we don't have any of these in Ohio that I know of, are In-N-Out. Is that In-N-Out burgers? Burgers, In-N-Out?
Yeah, I don't know that.
Huh? California.
Are they out in California? Okay, they're like I'm trying to think of another example. Rallies, or one of those that you can get quick quick fast food places. They're in 1948, their founder, I'm going to read on page 100 here a little bit. Their founder, Harry Snyder, wrote a simple mission statement for the company that remains unchanged today. This is the mission statement. Serve only the highest quality product, prepare it in a clean, sparkling environment, and serve it in a warm, friendly manner.
That's good.
Very clear, very fit.
Oh,
Yeah, they also included Bible verses in their packaging as a reflection of their faith. But the primary difference is that kind of seeped into everything that they did as excellence in everything, and they prioritized people over profit. And I think that says about how we create. God doesn't call us necessarily to be a bestseller author, and He doesn't call us to make the $1 million like J.K. Rowling's, which is probably more than $1 million. He doesn't call us to necessarily even to be published by a traditional publisher, but He calls us to write, and how we create, and let that seep through everything that we do, for the motive, for the reason. So I found it pretty, he writes that our faith should impact every aspect of our entrepreneur endeavors, from our motivation for creating, to the products we choose to create, to how we operate our ventures. God is always on the move around us, and an entrepreneur who is attuned to God's word and spirit will continually find ways to use the ventures to carry out His will. And I thought that was important. And excellence in everything is his main point in this chapter, because we are reflecting God in our works. The first entrepreneur on that. Chick-fil-A is another example.
yeah.
And a lot of us do know Chick-fil-A on that. It says they do nothing quickly, but they almost do everything with excellence. Their commitment to quality is baked into everything they do, including the company's name, Chick-fil-A, which A stands for top quality, which I didn't know.
Didn't know that.
I didn't know. And they say food is essential to life, therefore make it good. Oh, I do love it. So anyway, they reflect all the way through. And it's kind of neat to know some of these companies this way. It makes you want to be a better consumer in a lot of ways too, on that way. But I think the idea it's people over profit is as an entrepreneur is extremely important for us to keep in mind in how we treat people. In my former life, I was head of the county health department, and I probably maybe even a dozen times had to lay off people or fire people. Mm-hmm. And that's probably my toughest burden I still carry to this day. That was horrible to do. I always said whenever I had to bear bad news, I would do it with as much love and compassion as I could. And I think that's what we kind of need to keep our mind up. So that's section 2. Section 3, Johnnie.
Section 3, we're going to challenges in our creative life, in our life. And he talks, the first chapter in that section is about trust, hustle, and rest. And basically it is God, not us, who produces the results. And that's what we always have to keep in mind. In order to find true rest, hustling must be accompanied by even greater trusting in God. So we all, there's this whole thing about hustling, and we've kind of made that into a really almost an idol in a way, to hustle and lose sleep, eat on the run, all that kind of thing. And there is something to be so passionate about your work and what you want to do and reaching your goals, but yes, you need to put the time into that. You have to do what you're called to do, but you also need to trust that God is with you, that He has the plan. And one way to know that maybe you're not really on track is if you're not having time to rest, and if you don't have time to rest. And I think that's the focus really of this of this chapter. How do we know if we're trusting in God rather than ourselves? Are we at rest? So that's really the key to that one. Let me see what else I wanted to say about that specifically. Lots of verses in here. You all know the verse from, or the quote from St. Augustine, our hearts are restless until we find our rest in you. And of course, there's the wonderful verse from Psalms, be still and know that I am God. And that word still actually means stop. Just stop it.
Like the opposite of hustle, isn't it?
Yes. So I'm not telling you not to hustle, and I'm not telling you that sometimes you don't, we pull all-nighters. Sometimes we do. But are we resting? And are we taking that time to spend time with God? And are we taking time in prayer? And are we taking time in God's word? Or is our hustle just totally pushing that aside so we don't have time to do it? Jeannie is a big proponent on taking, I want to say Sabbath rest, but that's not the word I'm looking for.
Well, it's Sabbath, but then I take retreats.
Retreats. That's where I was thinking there was another word.
Up until the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
I've done some at home ones, but I'm desperate to get back and do a one away a little bit more.
And I just said it, like, for me personally, I'm really trying to get to the point, and I'm not totally 100% successful at this yet. I'm really trying to get to the point on Sundays where it's like no computer, just not. But we all have to figure out what that's going to be. But we do need to learn, or we do need to have that as part of our discipline. It's just there needs to be that time with God, needs to be that time with prayer, and then trust him with the results, and just do our best and trust him. Chapter 8 is responding to failure. And again, that comes with trusting, with just, we're all going to have failures. And this is something he says. For creatives, some level of failure is inevitable. It is going to come, and we need to know how we're going to handle it. And
that's part of the risk he's talking about.
Part of the risk. Yes. Because if you never fail, you're probably not risking enough. Send that manuscript into those contests. Send that manuscript to agents and editors. Go to writers' conferences. Meet those people in person. Meet other writers. Reach out. Be here. I mean, we're a very safe place for writers to gather, and we're glad. There's not much risk being here, but we're going to hopefully give you the tools and the confidence so you can take that risk, right? So you can take the risk. And yeah, you're not going to win every contest. You're not going to get a yes from every single person you send something to, but that's okay. You're trying and you're working and you're doing what God has called you to do. He talks about being transparent. Admit it when things don't go right, and it's fine to do that. Let me see what else I want to talk to you about. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next chapter. Excuse me. Hold on. I should have muted. I'm sorry, I didn't mute. Renewing our minds. I think that this was one of the favorite chapters for me in this section. He talks about reimagining our work as service to the one who's called us to create. So, if we have that kind of mindset that everything we do, we're doing for God's glory, we're going to do it with excellence, right? So part of this is, how do we renew our minds and remind ourselves of our commitment to create, to glorify our Creator and not ourselves? We do it by communing with God, communing with partners, and communing with other believers. So of course, I've already kind of talked about communing with God, and just having that time to pray, to have devotionals, to have quiet time, to have that Sabbath rest, to have a retreat if you can. Remember that Jesus needed to commune with God all the time, and if he did, and he's the Son of God, then we definitely do too. Communing with partners is really cool. It's like if you have a business partner, it's like talking with them, holding each other accountable. Perhaps your partner is your spouse, and even if you're not running a business together, you could still, that's the person that you're going to talk to. For me, one of the people that fulfills that role for me is my sister. I can talk to her about my writing. I can brainstorm with her. We can talk about different things. And then commune with other believers. And I love this because that's what we're doing right now. And there are so many opportunities for that. We've got Serious Writer, we've got Writers Chat, we've got other little groups. There's the Writers Chat family, there's Serious Writers family, there's Writers Chat Fiction, there's Writers Chat Kidlit. We're opening to starting other little Writers Chat groups if someone wants to take it on. But this is where you're just going to get that. People who understand what you're going through, that understand how scary it is to send out queries and proposals, and people that can help you make yours the best that it can be before you send it out, and people that can look over your contest entry, and then when it doesn't come out and the judge didn't give you the scores you thought, people who are going to say, I understand because I've been there too. And I get it,
It's the community. We do need community.
The community.
We need a companion. He sent us out 2 by 2s, and
Yep.
that's why I think this format works well too.
It does, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm going to just finish my section with one part, and it is what I talked about at the beginning with the Hugo quote about it just going on into eternity. And in this book, he talks about Tolkien, who's a big favorite. He is one of my favorite authors. And he writes this little story about somebody named Nigel, who wanted to draw. He was a painter, and he had a vision to create this tree. And he worked on it forever, all the rest of his life, and it never was exactly what he wanted it to be. And at the end, there was just like one little leaf. And it was in a museum for a while, but then the museum burned and it was lost. So it was gone forever. But it wasn't gone forever. This is a quote from Timothy Keller, and this is the last thing then that I'm going to talk about and turn it over to Bethany. Artists and entrepreneurs can identify very readily with Nigel. They work from visions, often very big ones, of a world they can uniquely imagine. Few realize even a significant percentage of their vision, and even fewer claim to have come close. If this life is all there is, then everything will eventually burn up in the death of the sun, and no one will even be around to remember anything that has ever happened. Everyone will be forgotten. Nothing we do will make any difference, and all good endeavors, even the best, will come to naught unless there is God. If the God of the Bible exists, and there is a true reality beneath and behind this one, and this life is not the only life, then every good endeavor, even the simplest ones, pursued in response to God's calling, can matter forever.
Wow.
I leave you with that.
What page is that on? Just curious.
That is on pages 164 and 165.
Where do we read that? Hey, Bethany, as you start this next section, do you want to, I know you've been monitoring the chat. Any comments in general? What's going on in the chat?
Yeah, I've not been monitoring.
Oh, yeah, lots of good stuff. People talking about different groups and then offshoot groups. And Kelly had asked, how do you know if a place is safe, just in response to, what Mom just said. And the answer that I gave in the chat was, I think that paying attention to how people respond to each other in the, if you're talking about Facebook groups, for example, are people kind? Is there any kind of nastiness when someone is vulnerable? Paying attention to the culture of the group is really helpful. But I think Facebook groups are a really great place. It can be a lot of safe places for people in different areas. I don't want to go too off of that, but lots of talk about that in the most recent part of the chat.
Okay, I know we've had a lot of different comments and some questions and stuff, so I'll kind of keep an eye on it while you talk about part. What are we up to? 3 or 4? What are we up to? 4.
4. So it's kind of fun because I just saw it. Leslie just said how many think about what creating will be like in eternity, and he actually talks about that in number 4. So I'll start there, and then I'll go back. So I've got my Kindle open on my computer because y'all know I can't touch those books. so I've got my notes right here. So I'm just going to scroll down to that section. and he talks about what is it going to look like in heaven. And I loved the picture that he created with this, in our mansions, are we going to have, the paintings by our favorite Christian artists and the blankets by the favorite people, the companies that do those. And just kind of thinking about, how are we going to pull that creativity into eternity? Because when you think about it, like when I was little, here's a confession. Has anyone else ever, when they were little, like not wanted to go to heaven right away because like they wanted to experience all the stuff on earth, right? Like, please don't let me die before I get married or have kids or like do all this, do all this stuff. And the thing is, it wasn't until I was like more in college and an adult where the idea that what God gave us on earth is nothing compared to what heaven's going to be. So if we love this, just think about what it's going to be like there. It's not going to be boring. It's not going to be, it's, I don't know. I don't want to go like too like crazy on that, but he kind of brought that in. And like, so how can we think about the stuff we're supposed to create here? So going into entrepreneurship, I think one of the main takeaways for me in this section was he talks about profit. It's all about the charge, like in the beginning of this section. Like, what do you do with the abundance? And what do you do when you've paid your bills and you've taken care of your family and you've done your investments and all those things? But then you have like this abundance of the leftover. What do you do with that? And he talks about how to use that in a wise way and a biblical way. But I think it comes down to, probably for writers specifically, I think a lot of times we have so much internal angst over marketing ourselves, or heaven forbid, putting a dollar sign next to something and trying to sell something. But all of this, when it comes to the entrepreneurship, is all about, in his book, business. And then how do we then create jobs or create products that are going to be helpful for people that then let us have an abundance where we can take it further and help other people. And so I think sometimes we stifle ourselves from the blessings God wants to give us with that hard work and the hustle, because we don't want to be seen as greedy or money grubbing. And yet maybe God called us to actually have products in some manner because there's something bigger he wants us to do with that, something else that needs to happen that can't unless we're helping fund it or be part of it. So I think it's like, this book is really great in terms of mental shifts and how we think about the creativity in terms of entrepreneurship. So that was like a little bit of a little thing. But then he also talks to it. What I loved in this section was really pulling together so much of sections 1 through 3 when he talks about the value systems of the companies and how we're responsible for demonstrating that throughout. And it really does trickle down. If the heads of the companies don't have their priorities right, it always goes, into the people that are working for them. And we talked about Chick-fil-A, but even Starbucks, they have this whole culture there. We'll make your drink better. We'll do it for you. This is your third home, or the third place, I think is what it is. Not it's third home, but homework. Starbucks was like kind of like their thing. So companies like that, they have this culture that they're building in. And if we're only like a 1-person show or a 2-person show, but are we creating a culture within ourselves to where when we touch things, people can see the remnants of that culture coming into it? And then last thing was he was talking about
That's a neat thought, that a lot of us are just a company to ourselves, but that is as important if you're single.
It is.
If you are multi-leveled or whatever, that's real inspiring.
Yeah, I like that. And then what I thought was cool when he was talking about missionaries and talked about the Great Commission, and I've heard this before too, where it's not about the going, it's as you go, you're creating disciples. As you're going, do it. Not go do it, but as you go, do it. And I think that gives us freedom then when we understand the language of what Jesus was saying, like as you go writing fiction or all the things that you're going to do. And as we all have our different parts to play, and as we're all different parts of the church, as we go, we're creating disciples in different ways. But when he talked about the missionaries, he was talking about the quote unquote successful, unsuccessful mission organizations, and how they saw people in terms of the verbiage that they would use. Like if they were only after the conversion, then they tended to not be as successful as the groups that were really trying to be more about a blessing. And he brought Chick-fil-A back into this with wanting to care about people's stories. And I think when we really put people as the focus, and it's not so much about that end result, I think that's where there's more room for God to use us in that creative path, whichever, manner he's choosing to use us in. And then the last thing, he talks about heaven, but then investing profits in others who are called to create, which then goes back to us, really letting God build our territories, with our creativity. But then the final part is laying those creations down at the feet of what he calls the first entrepreneur, which was the name that he kind of coined for God, because he pulled the entrepreneur characteristics that we have. Of course, we get them from God. And so sometimes he'll use that phrase in there in a respectful way, but just laying them back at his feet, remembering that it's always about bringing glory to him, bringing honor to him, and just, I don't know, using our talents in a way that does that. It was a great book.
I like the book, and like I said, it was a not a hard read, like I said, but I think it's a good example of a book. It's a good example, I think, of a book that brings you to God without preaching it too much. Does that make sense? By the examples, by the tone, by everything in that way. So is like any concluding things? I just, we skipped over the subtitle, and I thought I'd draw attention to that.
Yeah.
A biblical invitation to create, innovate, and risk. I kind of like that. We always say the subtitle has to draw you in. I think that's got some real power words. All the nouns, these power words there: biblical, invitation, create, innovate, risk. That
Yeah.
and alliteration. See, I don't know. They're just well titled, pretty color. Not a fancy cover.
Very pretty.
It's very pretty.
Very pretty. On that way, when you start looking at it in depth. As we invite people to come on back in, we got a few minutes. If people want to come on back in and comment or add or anything, Johnnie, Bethany, do you have anything in conclusion you want to say?
I'm just going to pull out a quote from page 97 real quick. He's at the very end of the chapter. He says, "Seek out the will of God for your day and generation. Be on the lookout for where the true Aslan is moving." Of course, that's a reference to C.S. Lewis's Aslan. And use your God-given abilities to create products that join him in his work. And don't be afraid to do that. I mean, it's like, if that's what God has given you, go for it. Do it.
Kind of validates imagination and work vocation, doesn't it?
Yes.
Were you going to say something, Bethany? Well, I think my final thought goes back to hustle that Mom talked about. And I think it's so important to have that rest, which is where I'm really going into right now. But I think most people don't ever stretch themselves to the point where they know where their limit are. I think that probably we get caught up on the rest part, that we don't ever stretch into the extent of the hustle we could actually have. So my encouragement would be to stretch a bit into the hustle, lean into it. You don't have to go so far where you find your limit, because I think that's when you get to have a breakdown. Yeah. But I think how we only use 5% of our brain or something. I think sometimes we don't maximize the drive that we have for stuff. So that would be my encouragement. That would be too. And I can't remember, it's gone up now. A couple comments it might have been Renee made the comment, can you imagine the creativity and imagination? We can't start to it, but the imagination and creation that goes on in heaven. It's just, if we get life-giving now with what the little taste we have, it's going to be a banquet in heaven. It will be. So that is so encouraging on that way. It's anybody want to add anything to this? We got our friends coming back on here. Anything you want to add to the conversation? Anybody else read the book?
I have gone through the book rather quickly, even though I didn't want to, but just to have a feel for what it was. I am actually going now. I've made this decision as we've been talking to go back and not only read it, but to journal as I'm going through it. Because I really believe that in my own life that I feel like there's a shift that's about to happen.
Ooh.
And I really just, I don't want to be too early. I don't want to be too late. I want to be where God wants me to be. I'm going to cry, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
He'll help you. He'll help you.
Vulnerability.
I know that he will. I absolutely know that he will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martin's
Just
got,
ordered the book.
huh? Go ahead.
Just ordered the book.
Ah,
I loved all the stuff. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to read this.
it's a good
Good.
book.
It's
Like
a,
I said, it's affirming, but kind of realigns you what this work is that we've been called to do, too. And it both affirms it and reminds us.
I would encourage everyone to sign up for his newsletter too, because he does put out these devotionals, and it's about work it's just really good. It's a newsletter that I usually do try to read. You know how you subscribe to so many and then you don't read them all. And his is one that I haven't read lately because I have been kind of busy, but I still save them because I want to read them, and it's just really inspiring to read his
We
talk.
can read his little bio on the back, and I just thought I probably should have started with that, but it says he's a serial entrepreneur, serial with an S, by the way. Well, I'm a word person, and a best-selling author who currently serves as the CEO of a venture-backed tech startup called Threshold 360. He's the co-founder of Citizen Investor, the world's largest crowdfunding platform for government projects. He's the author of Startup Stories. He is a good storyteller.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, on that. And so that's another something as a writer you can learn how it just doesn't start into him. He transitions well, I think, from one to another too. Jordan has twice been selected as the Google Fellow and served in the Bush White House in 2006. He lives in Tampa, Florida, Bethany.
Yeah, we're gonna try to do a meetup. We're working on it.
All right. With his wife and 2 young daughters.
It was on the recording. I didn't realize that. We mentioned it on Twitter. I'm gonna meet with him next month online. So.
And he does have a website that's called calledtocreate.org. It is. I didn't check. Is that where you got the newsletter?
I don't know. I think I thought it was jordanraynor.com, and I think that's where I was yesterday.
Okay.
So yeah, but calledtocreate.org. Let's put that up too.
Okay, that may just be book link and stuff.
Yeah, he has another book out now, and I'm so sorry I don't remember the name of it, a more recent one, but it
Yeah, on that.
yeah, then it escaped me.
Any final comments? I did not look, Melissa. I was bad again. I looked the other day what we were doing next week to tell everybody while we're still on the recording, but I forgot it. It's gone.
Sorry, I was looking up a website. I was totally disengaged there. Rhonda Dragomir and Kathleen Sweeney are going to be coming on and talking about their work with creating graphics on Instagram and, well, in general, social media graphics. So, yeah, we're looking forward to having them on.
We had her on. Go ahead.
I was just like, Kathleen has been on before with BookBrush, and Rhonda really just dove into that episode and started using BookBrush for her Instagram, and her Instagram is lovely and so impressive. So we asked her to come on and share what she's doing, and she invited Kathleen to come back again. So we're really excited about that, and it's actually a part 1, and then we'll have part 2 sometime in July. I don't remember the date right off the top of my head. We're really excited to have Rhonda doing some and Rhonda's a great teacher and doing very specifically, this is how you can do it too.
And it's a great follow-up to
Yeah.
the program we had on BookBrush, because a lot of us really were intrigued by that, and here one of our own took it and ran with it. I think it's going to be exciting. Bethany, are you going to add something?
Yes, I wanted to mention that, just as we were talking about companies that are doing these kinds of things, that what you might not know is that the guys who run BookBrush also run other ministries and have a super large ministry that's divided up into different categories and stuff. So this isn't like their only thing. They see this as a way to help support writers to get more of the word out, even though they don't come across as a Christian company. The guys who run it are like, we love them very, very much. At Serious Writer, Kyle and I we just are big fans of theirs, and so they're just an example of a company that's doing these kinds of things. But really, they've got this other thing too that's their big heart passion. So I'm super excited she's going to be back.
I am too. I am too. I've been using their graphics when I did my launch for The Mischief Thief, and it is just so
Beautiful.
easy just to stick stuff in there and to share those with my launch team, and then have them share those graphics. So yeah, I love BookBrush too.
That's great. So that's really encouraging and all that. Well, it is almost 12 in Eastern time. So we had an hour. Let me clarify that. Start over again. It's the end of our show. Thank you for being with us. And I kind of like it when we periodically do kind of a book overview and stuff like that, because it helps me a lot of times, gets into one of those books I want to read and I hadn't quite read yet. And yet, like I said, this was one I think was so applicable in so many different levels. So thank you for being with us. If you're watching the replay, thank you. And please join us next week. And those of you that are here live, stick around. We'll have the after parties as we finish the recording. We'll see you next week with Rhonda and Catherine. Bye-bye.
Bye.